Steve Jordan. And for all of those that, how many people are here from out of town? Are there anybody? Okay, a few people. Well, welcome. Well, what we've been doing is, since last about March, we've been having once a month people that were raised in town or that moved here, or parents who moved here at a very early time, to come and just talk about their early experiences. And today we have two wonderful people, mother-daughter team, and Minnie Paoli and her daughter Dolly. And Minnie was born here, and Dolly, you were also born here.
Yes.
Hmm? So what we're going to do is just kind of ask questions, see what life was like, because Minnie's family dates back before the turn of the century. And Minnie, we'll start off with you. When and where were you born?
I was born in Mendocino, down in the flat.
Now, you say down in the flat, does that mean Big River Flat?
Yeah, we just used to call it a flat, right in front of the mill.
And see what happened in the old days. There used to be a mill in town, and there were a lot of houses down along the Big River Flat area. And a lot of families who worked in the mill lived in those houses. And so a lot of people started out there in the flat, and then they eventually moved up into town, into different places as they accumulated the funds and whatnot to do it. Now, your last name was originally Paoli, and that's Italian. Were your parents born in the United States, or did they come here from Italy?
They came here from Italy, and they came from the town of Lucca.
From Lucca. What year was that they came here?
I think my dad came here in 1900, and my mother came here in
1905?
when the earthquake, San Francisco.
Oh, 1906.
Yeah, that's when the earthquake. She was there in San Francisco when the earthquake.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Well, when they first arrived, where did they land?
I really don't know where my father landed, but I know my mother was landed in Little River.
But I mean, did they first land in New York, or did they come right here?
They came from New York by train to San Francisco.
So they probably stopped off at Ellis Island then, in the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And then by train across the country to San Francisco.
Yeah. I think my mother said it took over a month to get here.
Whoa. And why did they come here to Mendocino?
Because my dad had brothers here. He had 3 of them.
And so he came up to join them?
Yeah.
Were they working in the woods at the time?
Cleon.
Oh, but Cleon. Were they working in the woods?
Yeah, making ties.
For the railroad?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 5 brothers and 1 sister.
And were you the youngest, the middle, or where?
I was the 5th.
And your parents, were they nice parents, or were they strict and mean?
They were very good people.
They were very good.
Yeah, never got in trouble.
Now, when you were raised down on Big River there, were there several houses down there then?
Where we lived, there was 2 there.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle we lived on top of the hill, and my uncle lived in the bottom by the road.
Now, in the wintertime, if there were big storms, would you have to be
They reached the house.
the water?
Yeah, it was very scary.
And did you go to grammar school here?
Yes.
Did they have bus service then, or did you have to walk?
Walk.
All the way from Big River, every day, all the way up,
Yeah, no bus.
and all the way back down at night.
Yeah. And the Indians used to come and camp there, and every summer, and they used to smoke abalones and fish and everything. And one day, an Indian started to chase after me when I was going to school. And my brother says, he was walking behind me, he says, he had a piece of iron, said, if you get that girl, I'll hit you in the head. He was gonna attack me.
So they had Indians in those days.
They came from Ukiah, and camped there all summer.
So if you were walking up the road and you,
They'd go to school.
and then if you saw Indians who were playing, what would you do? Would you all go inside the house if you were outside playing?
No, when you walked that sidewalk, there was like a island there. We used to call it the bull field.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we played baseball.
This is down on the flat?
Yeah.
Is that as you just turn in to go towards upriver, is that area on the left side?
It's kind of a bridge.
West, it's west. It's west.
The other side?
Yeah.
You can see it now as part of the beach, but before it had like swamp grass and stuff in it. They call it the bull field, I don't know why.
So that was the Paoli area.
Yeah.
How many kids lived down in the Big River area at that time?
Oh, there was so many, I couldn't tell you.
I mean, were there a lot of families who lived down
And
there?
they're all family.
A lot of families.
So there were a lot more houses than just
Oh,
two or
yeah.
three?
Yeah.
Up further from me, there was a lot of houses. There was Rogers, Silva, and Hercules Silva, and Vellini's, and Fraga, and Harry Booth, and Tanlin,
I think she's talking
and
about
all
town.
kids down there. And then across there was Patton on the one side of the river. We crossed the bridge, and there was somebody down on the left side of the bridge. I don't know who they were. A house there, had some children, and behind there was Peterson House. And on top of there was Silva.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot of Silvas.
Yeah. And their parents. And then all the kids came up from country,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them walked, Moretti's and I didn't know the name of them. And quite a few kids up there.
How old were you? How long did you live there? How old
We
were you?
lived there, I was born there, and I think that we lived there till after World War I. Then my dad moved to town.
Would you mind if I ask you a personal question? Yeah, everyone is dying to know. What year were you born?
I was born in 1909.
So we have real living history here. And then you moved up here after World War I, so you were about 10
Yeah.
years old then.
Yeah,
And where did you move to up here?
and at the hotel here, it was named the Campione Hotel.
For those that might not know, on Ukiah Street, there's a video store there now. And that was the hotel that her parents purchased. Did you work there in the hotel?
I was too little,
Oh.
but I still washed dishes and tried to help my mother.
Did your mother do most of the work there at the hotel?
Yes,
And your father, what did he do?
he worked in the mill as a machinist down there. He was a machinist.
So he worked in the mill and plus also had the hotel.
Yeah,
So he worked 2 jobs then.
yeah. So we didn't run the hotel much. My mother couldn't do it.
Now, what kind of people would stay there? Was it more people who were boarders that lived
The
in?
boarders.
So they
Now,
worked.
we didn't board them, but we gave them a room, breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
because my mother had too much to do.
And did they work in the mill, most of them?
Most of them did.
So they were kind of full-time.
Yeah, I can. We had quite a few.
Now, when you were a little girl, what games do you remember playing as a little girl?
Baseball.
Baseball. And what else? What was some of the other games that you enjoyed?
Basketball.
Basketball.
Mhm.
And what else?
And I used to walk a lot.
Well, I know to school that was I mean,
I walked a lot.
were there any special town characters that you remember when you were a little kid that maybe scared you or scared other people? You know what I mean?
No,
No?
I had, that day we had a lot of people that came, we used to call them tramps.
Mm-hmm.
They used to come uptown. We used to be scared of them.
And they would kind of pass through, or the,
Yeah, they passed through. Maybe they stopped there, but I don't know.
well, I can understand that. I remember a few tramps coming through town when I was a kid. They'd have like burlap sacks
Yeah.
rolled up and
Yeah.
over their
Yeah,
shoulders before backpacks.
And I remember an old man, we call him Old Man Rooster. We used to be afraid of him. And he always sat there in front of the post office. I was scared of him.
Did you ever have to go pick up the mail and walk past him?
Yeah, but I was shaking.
Whereabouts was the post office, please?
Where was the post office?
It was on the main street, on the other side.
Next to Joe Quayle's,
Yeah.
And there, at that side, there was the firehouse, and the shoemaker, and Katharina the candy store, and a little shop where they sold beautiful clothes, hats and things, and a jewelry shop, and Joe Quayle butcher shop.
That was all on the south side of Main Street.
Yeah.
That right now is just totally,
Yeah.
there's only one house now on the south side of
Yeah.
Main Street. But if
The
you,
Rosses used to live there, and he was.
Ross, there was a Ross at the mill.
Managed the mill, he was a boss of the mill.
Mhm. Now, you used to go to grammar school. Where was the grammar
Yeah.
school located?
Where's that little one where it is now?
The community school. I mean,
Yeah.
where the community center is now.
Yeah,
That used to
But
be the grammar school.
it was an old building.
It was not the one that's there
It
now.
wasn't pretty like this one.
What do you remember about grammar school? Do you remember some of the teachers?
Oh, I remember Mrs. Grant, Mrs. Daniel, Mrs. Tanlin, Mrs. Prentice, and
Were they nice teachers or were they strict? How
they were pretty strict, believe me.
now? If anybody was bad or disruptive, what would they do?
They bring you in the library, 2 teachers, and they had straps made out of horses' harness, and they would cut in 2 pieces, and they would strap you till you holler, those poor kids there. I would cry, I could hear them, and it was awful. And they beat them up. It was awful.
So they
I got no trouble. I was scared.
Delinquency then.
What time did school begin in the morning? Do you,
I think the same time they do now.
around 8:30
Yeah,
and end around 3:30 in the afternoon?
the afternoon, that was the end.
What was your favorite subject?
Arithmetic.
Arithmetic. What about recess? Did you enjoy recess?
Yeah, we used to go out there and play games,
What was your favorite game?
baseball.
What position position was your favorite position?
I was pitcher.
Oh, so you were pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was strong.
Oh gosh, I was gonna say the grammar school.
Asked me if it was just a girls' team or girls and boys.
Was it just a girls' team or girls and boys?
Boys and girls.
How many students were in your class?
Oh, that I don't know.
Well, you don't remember about how many?
No, we were overloaded.
Oh,
Overloaded.
Every desk was full.
well, that's good. Just trying to think of a few more school questions. Oh, I know. Did you ever have to write on the chalkboard? Or were you very good?
Yeah, we misspelled a word or something. We had to write it on the blackboard 100 times.
Now, yes.
Was it all classes, all grades in one room, or just your own grade?
Was it all grades in one room, or did
3 grades.
in a room?
Yeah,
So first, second, third, fourth,
Yeah.
fifth, and sixth?
yeah.
So that will probably be around
30
10 to
kids.
12 kids per class,
Yeah.
I would say. Let's go on a little bit. So you moved up here, then you went to high school here?
No, I didn't go.
No?
No, I went off to the, I stayed home and then I went to the city.
Well, how old were you then when you left the Mendocino area?
Oh, about 19 or 20.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do in your teenage years?
Well, I was married then.
Okay. And then you went off for a while. Now, Dolly,
Yeah, I had Dolly.
Dolly, was Dolly born here in Mendocino?
Yeah,
Where? At
the
the
hotel.
at the hotel?
Yeah.
So you're a local girl.
Yeah. In the video room.
Now, Dolly, what do you remember about being a little girl? What
Oh,
memories come to you?
well,
Was the hotel still in progress?
no, it wasn't, well, once in a while, this guy from Fort Bragg would come down and work in the lumber company down here, and he'd come for lunch, you
Mhm.
know, or something like that. But what I remember a lot of is we used to have peddlers that came around, you know, and they peddled their wares. And this man used to come once a year, and he had this wagon, and he would come to sell underwear. It was mostly men's stuff, hardly, or blankets he had, but a lot of underwear, socks, and heavy clothes. And he would take a canvas and he'd throw it out on the ground in front of the hotel, and there he'd pile all these clothes on there. And then maybe my grandfather would buy maybe one set of underwear, one underwear. And then he'd have to pile all this stuff back in that truck again. And he went to the camps, like 10 Mile, and sold to the guys that stayed in the camps up there.
Who
Because
worked in the woods?
yeah. And he came from the city somewhere, but I don't know where he came from. And he was a Frenchman. And then he would stay there and sleep and eat, you know, until he'd go to 10 Mile or whatever he's going, and he'd come back and he'd stay again, then he'd leave.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really funny, you know. I was thinking of that the other day, that peddler.
Okay, now Dolly, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the same question, if you won't mind telling us what year you were born here in Mendocino.
1927.
Oh.
That's a good year.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
And so you went to grammar school and high school here, right?
Yeah.
Now tell me a little bit about grammar school. What do you remember about grammar school? Would you walk to school every day?
Oh, yes, we had to walk to school every day. And there was 3 classes, you know, in a school, and I had Lang Chambers.
Oh, okay.
And I had the 3rd, I think it was 4th, 5th, no, 3rd, 4th, and 5th she had. And then you had to go to the principals, had 6th, 7th, and 8th. You had to go 8 grades in grammar school.
So was it a 3-room school? Because
Oh,
what
no,
about
they
first,
had
second,
more, they had more than 3 rooms there,
Okay.
but that's what all they used.
so it was first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth? No.
No, kindergarten, first and second.
They didn't have kindergarten.
First and second, then third, fourth, and fifth, sixth, and
They
seventh.
did.
Seventh,
Or sixth
okay.
and seventh.
Yeah, because we never had kindergarten either when I was going
No.
to school.
No.
The first and second were in one.
And they were still whipping the kids when I went to school.
Well, I can
Well,
remember that too. Jimmy.
We had a principal, and his name was Mr. Still. And whenever anybody was, you know, something that the teacher couldn't handle, because she'd usually get a ruler out and slap him on the hand, you know.
Mhm.
But this one time, Lang Chambers had her nephew was in school. His name was Johnny Bishop,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was a little devil. And so he wouldn't behave himself, and so she sent him to Mr. Still on the principal's office. And boy, they whipped the kids there. They did.
Now, Lang Chambers, how was she related to Ace Bishop?
Lang Chambers' sister was Ace's wife.
Okay, that's how it works. Because I
And
remember
she-
Bob Bishop,
Yeah.
who must have been a younger brother.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
So, and you never had any spankings?
No, no.
What was your favorite subject?
Well, geography, I think, because Lang Chambers, she would, if you studied a certain country, she would put this all down in front of her room. She would have the kids make little men and stuff out of paper mache and pipe cleaners, and they would draw like mountains or whatever if we were studying about Canada, and then she'd have this all down on the floor in the front of the room, and it was a beautiful display of what we were studying.
Mm.
Yeah.
So like a little panorama scene,
Yeah.
and then you'd go on to another
Yeah.
subject like.
At one time, we were studying Mexico, and she had us make these little bricks out of clay with a little bit of straw, you know, to make the adobe houses. And she had the whole thing on the floor there in the front of the room, and all the classes would come in to look at it. It was just,
That was pretty progressive.
yeah.
Now, did the school ever put on any little shows or plays during the year?
Yeah.
Like what? Was there?
We'd had to go up to the high school
Mhm.
and put on, I think we only put on 1 or 2 a year.
Is that
Like
during
They
public
called it an operetta,
Oh, okay.
you know, and there was a lot of kids, everybody, it was in it, you know, they didn't leave anybody out.
So you had like a spring program or something like that, or the operetta? Did you have a Christmas play too then?
No,
No.
not too much. At the school, we had a Christmas tree, you know, and stuff, and they gave us an orange.
Oranges were pretty special then,
Yeah,
though.
our boxes, they had these little boxes of candy, it had hard candy.
Oh, the hard candy?
Yeah, right, they'd stick together. But we had music. Mr. Dixon used to come from the high school and come down, and we'd all have singing lessons and sing.
How often? Once a week?
Maybe once every 2 weeks, it wasn't, you know. And then he would come, and anybody wanted to play an instrument, he would come from the high school, he would come down there and try to get a little band together.
So you had a nice little music program, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
kind of with Lang
Yeah.
Chambers, little arts and crafts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so your favorite subject was geography. What about recess? Did you?
Well, recess, you know, was all dirt outside there at the grammar school, and we had basketball court. We played basketball, we played hopscotch, we played, I don't know, marbles, you
Mhm.
know, because it was all dirt.
How about Annie Oker?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
But we played, we had baseball, yeah.
Baseball, I guess, was a staple.
Yeah, yeah. And Rose Rogers was standing in back of us up there, and they were getting ready to play baseball, and somebody swung a bat, I forget who it was, and hit her right across the head here with a bat, and they had to take her to the hospital.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, they cracked her head.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, But she survived.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, but boy, that was awful.
and to the hospital, was that in Fort Bragg?
Well, see, there was a doctor here, Dr. Preston,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to go, it was above the Bank of America, that was his office. But he couldn't do anything, usually you had to go to Fort Bragg. I mean, after he looked at you, you still had to go to Fort Bragg.
It's kind of like HMOs today. You go
Yeah.
to your first doctor and then your second referral.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question, does anyone remember Ed Burrow?
Yeah,
He lived across the grammar school.
Yeah.
Oh, skinny, always dressed.
how drunk.
Right, and there was a Mrs. Shaw too.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Did
Did you go up here?
Born in Jackson.
Oh. Oh. Jackson.
Francis and Kevin's sister. You know, it brings back memories, Paoli and I go to school.
Well, let's go now, so from grammar school, then you went to high school up
Yeah.
on the hill. Now, this is the old high school.
Yeah, the
There was
one,
a couple stories that didn't burn, or they tore it down?
they tore it down.
To build the new
Yeah.
high school that's there now.
Nice and windy and cold up there.
Great views.
Yeah, nice view. Well, during the war, it was a nice view, you know. We would watch the blimps come by. They'd fly these blimps by so that they could see if there was any submarines out there in the ocean.
During World War II, yeah. They, in fact, did they used to have people taking turns
Yeah.
watching the coast?
Yeah, I did that myself.
You did?
Yeah.
What would that consist of? What would you have to do? How long was the shift?
All night,
All night?
yeah.
And where would you do that from?
They made a little cabin up there, right next to the high school, the
Mhm.
highest point. And then you had to watch for lights. If you saw any lights on the ocean,
Yeah.
you'd call Russian Gulch. They had the army at Russian Gulch.
How many
and-
people did they have in the army there?
I don't know, they had quite a few. And because soon as war broke out, they came to Russian Gulch. I think it was the 7th Division. And then Heiser had that tank, and they had soldiers up on top of the tank, going and around on that tank up there, watching the ocean, watching for, you know, because they thought the Japanese were coming right in on us there. And so when we were watching, Betty Brown was my best friend, and she was with me on this watch deal. And we watched from about 2 o'clock in the morning to about 7 in the morning. And then we had to go to school.
How many days a week would you do that?
Oh, maybe once a week.
And then
They had men at first. First they didn't have no students. They had men doing that, you know, when war first broke out.
Now, I remember you telling me something interesting, since for a while there you were raised by your grandparents,
Yes,
who were Italian.
yeah,
Were they American citizens?
no.
And so during the war, because you lived down here, the main highway was right over here on Lansing Street. That was the
Yeah.
highway in town. What happened?
We had to move.
They had to move.
We had to move because my grandparents were not American citizens. They'd been here for 50 years, but still. So first, when war broke out, they were gonna send them to Ukiah. They're thinking about the 101 instead of the 1. And then I don't know what happened, but they changed their minds. And so it just so happened that my uncle happened to have a place up in Furytown. We called it Furytown then. And so we had to move up there and leave everything. I mean, you know, just leave the place and go, that's all. And we lived up there 4 years.
So during the war, what happened, anybody that was, I think, Italian or German,
Had to
that were
move.
non-citizens, had to move to the east side of the highway in town.
Yeah.
And you could not, you had to be in by a certain time, you couldn't, yeah, and you couldn't come, like my grandfather, he couldn't come downtown. I mean, if he did, he had to come in Mendoza's back door, he couldn't come in the front door.
You had to do the shopping.
And I had to do all the shopping. And Gus Mendoza used to be so good to me because I was going to high school. And he'd say, well, Mendoza's store delivered to the houses. People would put an order in, and maybe they didn't have a car, so they would deliver. And so Gus had the 4 o'clock delivery for Furytown. And he'd say, Dolly, I'm gonna go up in about 10 or 15 minutes, you ride with me, you know, so I'd ride up with him. You know, he delivered all these,
But tell this story, continue. Because you told me, see, Furytown is east of town, where the stoplight is. If you go up the hill, the top of that is called Furytown. Why was it called Furytown?
oh, the people are fighting all the time.
Fury, F-U-R-Y.
Oh, God.
That was a Irish bench.
And you told me the story that how he would offer to give you a ride, but was Gus a talker with all
Oh, yeah, he'd stop and, you know, then everybody'd come out and start talking, and by the time I got home, it was faster if I walked.
It would take her an hour to get home
Oh,
because he
yeah.
would take so long talking and
Oh,
chatting.
he'd stop and talk to all these people that, you know, wanna talk to him. And, Mrs. Chicky, she had to move because she wasn't a citizen, Dick's wife. And she moved up in Grindles Park, there was cabins there. And so she moved up there with her two girls, and then Dick would go up there and eat his dinner, and he'd go back down and watch the place, you know.
But was he a citizen?
He was and she wasn't.
Oh, she wasn't. Oh, so that split up the family.
Yeah.
Dick's, okay, talk about Dick Chicky. The thing is, down here, a few doors down the road, down the main street here, there's a bar called Dick's Place. And that belonged to Dick Chicky. That was his bar. He started it. And then his son later took it over, and then in the 80s, I think Pete sold it. But, so he'd be there at the bar taking care of all that while his wife had to live on the other side of the highway.
Yeah.
Oh.
What was the reasoning that they had to live?
Non-citizen, she was a non-citizen.
I know.
Well, they were,
Could be a threat.
Oh,
well, they were called enemy aliens.
oh,
Because, see, Italy had gone with Germany, and so that's
I
why.
mean, it would be more dangerous to live in town than
Yeah.
inland?
Well, they're closer to the coast,
Yeah.
and they could send messages out to
Oh, I
people
see.
in the water, because they would come in, you know, the Italians by boat.
You could not only, you couldn't go live there, you couldn't even go down to do business.
Really?
Couldn't
No.
come into town?
No, you couldn't cross Highway 1 because my parents were not citizens during World War II. My brothers were in the service, but they weren't citizens. They couldn't go to the bank or the post office. If it wasn't for Mendoza's, they would not have been able to do business. You couldn't cross Highway 1 at the beginning of the war, the first couple of years.
How long did it last?
About 2 years, and then they relented a little bit.
I think in 1944,
Yeah.
we could move down, we moved back downtown, 1944.
I'm gonna jump back for a second to Minnie, talking about the war. I'm gonna go back to the First World War, and what was that like in town? What do you recall?
Well, it was kind of, I think I came up, I was living in Oakland, and I came up with something.
Well, this is 1918, the First War.
Oh,
You were like 10 years old.
oh.
They had the
I
flu.
knew when the war was over, all the whistle blew in town, in the churches, the bells all were ringing up for hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they would say, Viva, Viva. That means they won, we won. And it was terrible. Everybody was hollering and singing.
It was a big celebration then
Yeah.
after the end of World War
Yeah,
I. Now, right after World War I, something very tragic struck all of America, and that was this big flu epidemic.
Remember the flu?
Do you remember the flu epidemic that hit?
The
pardon me?
flu.
The flu.
Oh, I remember the flu down there in the flat. The men were dying like flies there. And the electric wire, you see a line of birds, and they all dropped dead in line. It was so bad down there.
So like birds would be on the telephone wires or the electric wires, and they just fall dead
Yeah.
because of the flu.
Yeah, dead.
And did they have to collect the birds and burn them or something, or what?
No, I don't know what they did. They raked them up or threw them in the fire. That fire burned day and night back there. You know, burning bark and slab
At the mill.
At the
At the
mill.
mill.
That's what you're
coming
talking
down.
So in town, the mill was located out here in the point? No, it was down in the flat.
about.
In the flat,
And then they brought the lumber up to the
Yeah.
point to load on the
Yeah.
ships.
Yeah.
yeah,
So was there a lot of soot in the air?
I guess that's
do you
I don't
remember?
know.
No?
No.
but
From
I
all the burning.
remember all the men
They had
that
slash
died.
fire.
A what?
Lot of
Slash
men
fire. They
died
call it
that worked
slash.
there.
What's a slash fire?
Big, like a bonfire out there where all the stuff would come off of a pulley and drop down and burn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But wouldn't this stuff go into the air and kind of?
I don't, nobody seemed to claim anything about
They
it. I
packed the
don't know.
flu, I think,
Hmm.
you know,
Now,
that was bad. You know, them good men live in those cabins, one die, next one die, and everything.
now, speaking of the townspeople, were there like gangs of people in town that were mean to each other, or were people pretty respectful to each other in town?
About the flu,
No, I'm just talking now about in general, when you were
Oh.
young. Were people pretty nice to each other in town?
well, I don't know, because they came down from the camps.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many camps, Nicholson Camp and Boyles Camp, and they all came down there on Saturday and Sunday. They celebrate and get drunk. I remember, there were so many saloons. They came down with horses.
Were there a lot of saloons in town?
Well, that I don't know, because I was too young.
You were
to
too
know.
young. Right, that's nice.
My dad might have known.
Now, you mentioned to me before that you had worked for a while for Dr. Whited in town, the dentist.
I worked first for the Hotel Mendocino.
Mm-hmm.
Eh,
What did you do there?
Oh, I done everything. And I remember even Reagan come in.
Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
As an actor?
Uh-huh.
That's when I think
Yeah.
they made Johnny Belinda here in town, and his
Yeah.
wife was Shane Wyman at the time.
Yeah, I remember them.
And I also heard a story, now this is just pure gossip, that there was a young actress named Nancy Davis who also came to town and stayed at, I think, Little River. That became Nancy Reagan later on.
Oh.
But she happened to make a little visit up here too, so that's just for, something to tuck away.
Okay.
Dolly.
Uh-oh.
No, not uh-oh. What do you remember about high school? What was?
Oh, we had a lot of fun in high school. But the only trouble is in high school, it was during the war. And we were losing our teachers because they either were going to the shipyards and work where they made more money, or they were being drafted. If they were men, they were being drafted. And so we got teachers from, like I told you, that soldiers were at Russian Gulch. And one teacher we had, she taught, she was from Georgia. I think she taught commercial shorthand and stuff.
I don't know, but we marched. We
Yeah.
learned how to march.
And then we had drills where we had to leave the high school and run down. There was a lot of cypress trees along the football field, and we had to run down there and hide under those cypress trees. We all had to lay down under those cypress trees in case the Japanese came. And then they'd ring the bell and we'd go back in school again. Oh, God.
Now, what about dances and stuff like that?
Well,
during the-
they had dances, but we had to have, the windows all had to be covered, lights shining out. And we didn't have too many dances, or
During the war?
parties during the war, no. So it was kinda hard. I don't think that we got really the proper education that we should have had. Because we were, getting less teachers all the time and stuff.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
What was the population Dolly during World War II?
The population in Mendocino? Not too much. I don't
Over
know.
500?
Well, maybe 1,000. I don't, I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing. And during World War II, we were rationed, we had to have meat stamps, we had to have stamps for vegetables, they had to have gas stamps, and I think they only gave the workers that went to Fort Bragg, I think it was 5 gallons a week, I think, that's all they got. And they put a A on their, and then if you were something else, they put a B on your windshield, But so, it was hard because you couldn't get very much meat. And we had a lot of rabbits. My grandfather raised a lot of rabbits. And so every Saturday, he'd kill quite a few rabbits, and then I'd take them downtown because we had orders from people, they were eating rabbits, because they couldn't afford the meat stamps. I didn't have to take meat stamps for the rabbits.
So did people kind of do a lot of, say, bartering or, trading vegetables for other things, or?
Well, yeah, they raised vegetable gardens, they call them victory gardens, So, yeah.
A little bit aside, you mentioned this wonderful old high school up on the hill that in all the pictures, everybody just goes crazy about it. Here, it was such a neat school. When they tore that down and put up the new high school in the same place, it was much, much, much lower. I know it was a broader high school, so they had to flatten it out, but it seems like there must have been tons and tons of earth. Where the hell did they put it?
Gee, I don't know. See, when I graduated school was 1945, and I left. I went up and stayed with my aunt at Noyo. She had a store up there.
Just before the new school was.
Yeah, so I don't know what they did with it, but they leveled that hill.
A lot of it was put down
Yeah.
the field.
Yeah.
A lot of it was put down to football field, and then a lot of it was shoved over the side. I went to high school, I was the last, the class of 48 was the last one to graduate from the old school. I graduated in 49, there was not a high school there when I graduated. We went to all different buildings to go to school, so my family all graduated, and I got cheated out of graduating out of either school. But they did, they leveled it, put a lot of it down for the football field, and a lot of it shoved off to the side, because I was in school during that period of time.
How long did it take from Mendocino to Fort Bragg in those days?
Well, it took a lot longer because the highway wasn't straight like it is now, But there was a lot of bridges. Pine Beach, there was a bridge, and you went that way,
Yeah.
inland. So I don't know if I would maybe more than half an hour, I would imagine.
About 45 minutes.
Yeah, and then I don't think you could go as fast with the cars then that you can now.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question about the Lisbon House, the hotel we live. I had my office up there and wanted to know what was the northeast corner upstairs. What was that?
Bedroom.
Hotel.
Bedroom. Yeah.
Whose bedroom?
That was for the boarders.
There was a word.
Yeah. There was a lot of bedrooms upstairs there.
Is that building itself, was it bigger earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It had a big dining room, and that's been torn down. And, and a big kitchen. There was a big kitchen, washroom. Yeah, that all was torn down.
Did it always have a porch all the way across from the back, like it has now? Upstairs has a porch.
Oh, yeah, it did.
Yeah, I like that.
It did, yeah. And there was a tank there.
There's water tanks there,
Yeah.
but not as tall.
No, there was a tank there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very nice about 15 years ago, right? Does it look like it was restored about 15 years ago?
Yeah,
It's a very nice building, I like it.
well, they tore all the pieces there, there was just a skeleton when L. Weaver, I sold it to L. Weaver. It belonged to my uncle, Miles Paoli, and he left it to me. And so, my husband and I, we figured that we didn't want to go in a hole for about $300,000 or $400,000, to fix it, because we had contractors look at it. So L. Weaver took it, and he did, so he just tore it all. There was nothing inside. So the inside now is a lot different than when I lived there.
They didn't have a historical, review board back then.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
tear it down and go back up free, all material. Is
Yeah.
there any of the old part of the building left at all? No.
We had stairs, the doors are there at the video place, there were stairs, we went upstairs. There was no stairs on the outside, they were all on the inside, yeah. And there was all bedrooms up there, upstairs was all bedrooms, yeah. And then downstairs it had a bar, on where the baby laplane is, there was a bar. And a big mirror there, Mr. Zaka bought the bar and the mirror. And I took it to the art center or someplace. And then there was this big dining room, which isn't there anymore, you know.
When Mr. Ruiz built that building,
Yeah,
originally, the books say he was proud of the 90-foot-high flagpole, the highest flagpole in town. What happened to that?
I don't know, the flagpole was already gone. See, Mr. Lewis built that, that's why it's called the Lisbon House.
Yeah.
Then he added on to it. That's the first part there that you see that goes like this. It says Lisbon House. Then he built this way. You know, he kept building, bringing short boards like this to build inside with. And then he sold it to Mrs. Bordner. Mrs. Bordner and her husband bought it. And then the Paolis bought it from the Bordners. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any town characters that you remember growing up distinctive? You
Well,
know,
Ed Crow.
Ed Crow. Now
Ed
tell us a little
Crow.
bit about Ed Crow.
Well, Ed Crow, I guess, came from a wealthy family, and I guess they wanted him in Mendocino. And he always wore a suit and a dirty shirt and necktie. And he used to drink a lot, you know, and he had a lot of money. And this was when towards the Depression, you know, and just getting over it, people didn't have very much money in Mendocino. And he would just say, huh, good man for the town, huh? And he'd come up to our place there at the hotel, and my grandfather made wine. And he wanted a glass of wine, and he'd throw the money. You know, he would never give it to you, you know, he'd throw the money, 2 bits. 25 cents would be a glass of wine, you know, and so he was really a character, you know. Man.
Did he have not many friends?
No.
No. Tell us a little bit about your grandfather making wine.
Well, that was a must. You had to have wine. The house could be falling down, but he had to have his wine. And so he'd make a truckload would come from Ukiah.
A truckload of
Grapes.
grapes.
And so they made the wine. And then
Where would he make it?
he made it there in the hotel.
Was
He
it like
had a special room where he had a big vat, and then they'd grind those grapes, you know, and then they'd all go in there. And then he would stir them. He'd get up there and he'd stir them. You know, it looked like an oar. It was so big, you know. And you had to leave it there, I don't know how long, to ferment. And then he had a system. And he had a cork on the bottom of that vat, and he put a hose in there, and then he had a hole in the floor because the hotel was about 6 feet high. You could walk all over underneath the hotel, about 6 feet. And so he had the barrel underneath there, and then that hose coming down, and so he drained it into the barrel underneath the house.
So he made the wine on one floor,
Yeah.
first floor, and then drained it down underneath the house
Yeah.
into.
Right.
Now was.
Oh man,
Go
so
ahead.
50 cents he'd sell a gallon of wine. You know what, they had dances at the IOF Hall, the Oddfellows Hall is not there, well, half of it's there. And the guys would come, they were from Fort Bragg and all over, you know, they'd come and say, Mr. Paoli, we want a gallon of wine, so he'd give them a gallon of wine for 50 cents. Yeah.
Did he make it during the
Prohibition.
prohibition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay now, you can let the cat out of the bag. It's-
The Italian that didn't.
Yeah.
Wasn't it the Italians were allowed to make so much wine?
Yeah, there was a certain amount that they could make.
Yeah.
And then, he'd make that grappa, that white lightning. And you could smell it, you know, oh my God, you open the front door and you could just smell it.
Yeah. Did anyone make any beer here in those days?
Yeah, he made beer, yeah. He made good beer.
Did you, you sampled some?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was free, I could just, go down under the house there and then take a spigot.
So your grandparents, they were pretty lenient that way, they let you have a glass of wine?
They, what your meals especially, you had to have a glass of wine. Well, he wouldn't give me a whole glass, you know. The glasses were a lot smaller then than they are now.
They were all water.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Yes.
Do you remember any shipwrecks or storms when?
I remember a lot of storms, but not shipwrecks, but I remember the ships coming into Mendocino, and we could hear that, that when the ship came in, it would blow its whistle, that it was in, you know. And of course, Morris Froggatt gave a good talk on that, and you know, the groceries for the stores came on the ship, and they were unloaded first, and then the lumber would be loaded up next. And I had an uncle, Value, that was his job, now this is when I was pretty little, to go and tie the steamer, they called it the steamer, they had to tie it up. It would drop its anchor, but it had to be tied to buoys, and they had these big logs out there in the ocean, and then they would tie the steamer to these logs, but these logs had big anchors down in the ocean, you know, to hold them still there. And that's how they had to keep that ship pretty steady, so when the line came down with the lumber, you know, there's not swinging back and forth.
Well, that's how they did that.
Yeah.
Did you ever ride that little carrier down to
No,
a ship?
I never.
They used to have this little, like a bucket that would fit like 3 or 4 people in it, and they would go from the land, from the up in the cliffs, and
Yeah.
load people down. Did you ever ride in that, Minnie?
No.
And bring people, also passengers from the ship,
Yeah.
up to shore that way?
Yeah, I remember that, but I never been ridden in it. I
Now,
was scared.
now, when you were a little girl, where the main street, was it just a mud or dirt street?
It was a dirt street.
Ukiah Street was too.
Now horses used to come in.
And Mr.
And
Doolittle used to
tie
run
up.
the scraper.
They had like a pole,
Uh-huh.
and they would, and had rings on them, and they would tie their horse there, on one on this side,
Oh, along the sidewalk, you mean?
no, on the street.
Okay, horse ring. Now, tell me about Mr. Doolittle and
Mr. Doolittle run the scraper for the county, and he would scrape the roads, and when we saw Mr. Doolittle scraping the roads, it would rain the next day. Oh,
What else do you remember? What else do you recall? I mean, then all of a sudden it's like,
yeah, I'll recall a lot of things I don't know. Oh, gosh.
were the different seasons, like the winter could be pretty severe, or what was the,
Yeah, when it rained, it really rained.
and would lights go out often?
Yeah, it would, yeah. See, we got our lights from, it wasn't PG&E then. It was another company in Fort Bragg, and that wasn't too good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, their lights would go off. Yeah. Well, when I stayed in the old hotel up there, and it was really stormy, that thing would shake. When the wind would blow, it would shake, you know.
Now, your Uncle Miles, he used to work, you said, at the lumber mill in Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
When did he start his TV repair shop?
Oh, he was doing radio when he was young, when he, you know.
Yeah.
He had the first sending set that there was. He made it himself.
About,
You know, Send in Code,
mhm.
he had the first set.
About what year was that?
Gee, I don't know. He was born in 1906, so gee, that might have been in maybe 1917, 18, I don't know. I'm just guessing now, I don't know. But he was always interested in radio, and he was working in radios all the time.
Because I remember her uncle used to be the town radio and TV repairman when I was a little boy. And when he passed away, I went down to the yard sale. And I bought all these old radios and things from Dolly, and it turns out that one of the radios I bought from him was one of these early portables, these wood portables, that belonged to Clyde Ann's father and mother, that he never got around to fixing.
We had so many radios,
Oh,
you couldn't believe.
I had so much fun going through all that stuff.
Oh, man.
Does anybody, yes?
What, you were here when the mill closed down in '38?
Yeah.
What happened to the town when all of a sudden, I guess, all the lumber guys leave and so forth?
It all went to Fort Bragg.
So what happens here?
Well, these people went to Fort Bragg to work. You know, there was no work hardly here at all.
So what happened to the town?
Did it kind of die down, the town?
The town had died down, sure. Because all the people had to go other places to work.
But did a fair amount of people still live here and then just,
They still lived in
drive-
Mendocino, but they went to Fort Bragg. Yeah,
To work.
to work. My
So-
uncle did too. He went to work in Fort Bragg mill, you know. And I had an uncle that drove truck for Mendoza's. Mendoza's had a big semi truck, and he was the first driver. And they had to take all they'd go to Petaluma to take all the eggs. And there was a lot of egg farmers here. Paoli was one of them. And so Jesse was his name, and he would take and go to Petaluma about 3 times a week with that big semi truck of Mendoza's.
I heard that the big tragedy when as long as the lumber mill was going, there were bordellos in town that were functioning. And I heard that when the lumber company closed down, the bordellos closed down.
Yeah, I guess they went to Fort Bragg. Oh, dear.
no, yes,
Speaking of bordellos, I need to ask a question about naked ladies, but I'm talking about the Amarillo Belladonna. Would you ask your mother if there were those pink lady lilies here? Does she remember when she was going? I'm trying to find out when they got here,
Oh,
because they're not native to this.
do you know those pink ladies, those flowers, they're called pink ladies?
or naked ladies.
Naked ladies?
Those were lady slippers?
No,
No.
not lady slippers.
Uh,
They're big about that high.
Trillion?
No, they call them naked ladies.
They just finished blooming.
Oh, yes.
When did they come to Mendocino?
I don't know, they were always, here.
They always were here?
She remembers them when she was little.
Yeah. So if,
We had a lot of, those lilies, what they call calla lily.
mhm.
No, she's
all
talking
over.
about,
Yeah,
down
the
here.
calla lilies are the white ones, and naked ladies are pink, like a little pink
Yeah,
truck.
I know.
And they were here when you were a girl. Okay. D- Any other characters you could think of that would be fun? Now, like the Gold Dust Twins, or any? Do you remember the Gold Dust Twins?
no, I
No,
guess
No.
Henry?
Who?
Richie and Henry.
Oh, I've never heard of them, the Gold Dust.
No, they're not the Gold Dust Twins. No, my grandmother did about the Gold Dust. Richie and Henry.
Oh, Richie and Henry, yeah.
They're trying to be very discreet and not say, they don't want to do any gossiping, because they said to me earlier, they're not gonna mention any names.
Yeah.
But do you remember, and I keep bringing this up all the time, there was supposed to be a lady in town who during, I guess, Prohibition, she loved to drink, but there was no liquor, so she used to buy gallons of vanilla and said that she was doing a lot of baking.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Mrs. Shaw, we got a name.
Lizzie Shaw.
Lizzie Shaw?
Yeah.
Yes.
you ask Dolly if there was a bridge, Winnie the Bridge, Fort Bragg, where the one is right now that has been upgraded? Is there a bridge there?
Was there an oil bridge when you were a girl? Was the bridge there where it is now?
No,
It was.
no. It went right by, my aunts owned the Noyo store at Noyo, and the bridge went right by her store. And it's right now, as the road as you go down to Noyo, the bridge was, that's where the bridge was.
So you would
It
go.
went clear across the river. It
But-
went clear across the river.
So to go to Fort Bragg, you had to go up the road a little bit there, like on Highway 20, and then down to Noyo,
Yeah.
over the bridge.
Yeah.
That's amazing. He's got a picture of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's where it was.
Well, does anybody else have any other questions? Yes.
I wonder if the people in your school spoke different languages than English when
Oh, what about the different people that lived in town? Because there were Italians, Portuguese, Chinese.
Well, there was very few Italian.
Mm-hmm.
There was our family and the Borginen and my uncle. That was all.
But
A lot of Portuguese people.
mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of Irish people.
And Finn and Swede.
I
But everyone spoke English, so yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. People didn't speak, but a lot of broken English. People spoke with a lot of accents.
I don't remember that.
did they all go to school?
Did they all go to school here?
They all went to school.
The kids would
The
have.
kids
definitely.
all went to school.
Dolly, tell everybody the pictures behind the,
Oh. Up here in the piano. This is
Grandfather's brother.
Carmel. This is your aunt. This is Minnie. Who's this? And this is Minnie and the young girls. And they also have some other photographs here that are a little bit too small to just hold up and show, but after we finish here, I'm sure welcome to come up and take a look at them and just see what.
Show me
What?
the picture of the mill there. The mill crew was in the 1919. And that's,
This one?
yeah, that's my mother. You can pass it around.
Okay.
You know, I knew the name of those.
The names are all in the back.
Each one that died from a little girl. A lot of them in that picture.
But they have a lot of small pictures here too, so afterwards, just come up please and take a look. Maybe you can spread them out across the
Yeah.
piano or something. Any other questions? Yes?
Dolly,
Mhm.
did anyone, as far as you can remember, ever suggest that you look like Minnie? You sure look like her in that picture.
Wasn't that cute?
Yes, and you still are.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. When I was younger, they didn't, but now that now they
We
think
just
I
lived
look more
across
like my
the
mother.
road from there.
Yeah.
All those men knew us.
Yes.
Yeah, do you remember Mrs. McCallum?
Yes.
Tell
Yeah.
me about Mrs. McCallum.
Mrs. McCallum was a very generous woman, and she was really nice. And when I was going to catechism at the Catholic Church, and the nuns would come every summer from the Holy Name Society in the city. They would come for 1 month, and Mrs. McCallum would come up there, and she would bring cookies, candy, and all that stuff for us while we were at catechism. And then she had a son named Donald. And anybody that had to go to a doctor or had to go to Fort Bragg, that's all they had to do was go talk to Mrs. McCallum, and Donald would take them. Yeah.
What kind of a car did he have?
He had the newest cars. Whenever a new car came out, he had it. And she loved roses, and she had a rose garden. And she'd be out there with this great big hat on, and she had a gardener, and she would sit right there and watch the gardener while he was working in her roses. But she was really a swell person. Yeah.
Any other questions or Yes.
Any tie into, we used to live on the main line of outside of Philadelphia, and the end of the main line was a town called Paoli.
There is in Pennsylvania right now.
Yeah, that's
That's
Tied
it.
into your family?
Well, there probably is, but we don't know, you know, because every year, this man in, he was a Paoli in Oakland. He had the restaurant called Clam, what was it, Clam what?
The clam chowder.
Clam chowder. But anyhow, he would have a reunion for the Paolis, and they would all go there once a year in Oakland. And so there's Paolis all over that, you know, when you get down to about the third generation, you kind of lose track.
All came from where in Italy?
Lucca,
Lucca, where's that?
it's Tuscany, northern
Oh,
Italy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. They all came from there. 5 brothers came here to America, and two didn't. They went back. They didn't like the Thai camps, so they went back to Italy. But the 3 stayed. Yeah.
Well, Minnie and Dolly, thank you very much. We appreciate it.